Welcome back to the Junkyard Dogcast. Georgia has won its 22nd straight home game, taking down UAB 49-21. Georgia is now 4-0 and will head into its first real test of the season, the pivotal road match next Saturday at Auburn. You know what? Overall, Georgia on offense, no problem putting up yards overall in this game. At this point, you have to kind of acknowledge that Georgia is a slow starter. They've averaged 6 points in the first quarter this season, like 63 yards. It's becoming a trend now. It's not really slow starting right now. It's slow scoring, and I think when you have just one touchdown and one field goal on 6 possessions so far this year, that becomes a trend. We have gone through 4 games of a 12-game season, so the math tells us we're 1/3 through the slate. Now, obviously, the opponents have kind of not really been premier, so you have to wonder, is Georgia, as it's been prone to do under Kirby Smart, guilty of playing with its food? And the truth is that we have no way of knowing because Georgia has not been tested yet with an opponent that we would consider to be one of the better teams in college football. Last year, Georgia averaged a little over 9 points in the first quarter last year. And this year, again, they've scored 17 through 4 games. So I think you have to look at this roster and think that things are a little different. It's not the same team as the last 2 years, but we still really don't know what Georgia brings to the table overall. I think you look at, again, they put up 581 yards, scored touchdowns on all 6 of their red zone trips. You would have liked Carson Beck to still, again, be a little bit sharper, still 22 of 32 for 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnover plays for him. I still think, again, that's a career high day for him. And he did that with just 2 scholarship running backs behind him. So there is some credit to be made there, I think, in this game. For the most part, Mike Bobo called about as good a game as you can call. For Georgia having as many starters as they had out, I think they did well, but we're not going to make excuses. This is a game where, again, Georgia was favored by well over 40 points. And so there's still some, throws that Carson Beck would probably want to have back, overthrowing Jackson Meeks. I think the throw to Arian Smith was on target. That's one that Arian Smith has to catch. So there's still, again, some big plays that were kind of left out there. The offensive line, though, for the most part, did a lot better in a game where they should have done a lot better. They should have overmatched the opponent, so they got that job done. So credit to them for bouncing back without having Amarius Mims out there. They shuffled the offensive line a couple times this game and looked pretty solid doing it. The defense, this is not the 2021 or 2022 defense so far, especially in the red zone. We're talking about the best red zone defense last season, one of the best the year before. UAB scored on all 3 trips in the red zone, and they couldn't stop UAB passing in the first half. I mean, they allowed them to complete 15 of 22 passes in the first half. But at the same time, UAB only had 4.4 yards per play. That was a season low. Again, but we're not going to give credit where it shouldn't be due. This is a game where Georgia's defense, regardless of who's out there, regardless of which starters are not out there, which, again, there were 6 starters out of this game, including Michael Williams, you wanted to see more from this defense overall, and they allowed UAB to convert third downs at a much higher rate than they should have. If I'm remembering correctly, I think in the first half, again, they were like 3 of 7. That's, again, you got to do better than that. Ultimately, they end up being 4 of 15 on third down. Like every game this season, Georgia wins the half and clamped down in the third quarter once again. I think right now we are at the point where Georgia is what they've gotten to where No, they are shutting teams out in the third quarter, but I think that's up to like 68, 69 points to 0 in the third quarter this season, which again, credit to the coaching staff for making adjustments. But the opponents Georgia's had so far this year, it shouldn't be something we're really talking about right now as far as halftime adjustments, because I'm not saying they have a murderer's row ahead of them, but the competition does ramp up. And obviously, you got Auburn next week on the road. You're going to have to really clamp down defensively if you want to be able to continue to run the slate. And again, special teams. Georgia gave UAB a short field. Makai Muse had that fumble on the punt return, multiple turnovers on special teams. Dylan Bell fumbled a kickoff return. You gave the Blazers a chance to have a short field. They had a 29-yard kickoff return as well. Georgia got called for a block in the back on a punt return. These kind of mistakes in special teams, the margin for error is going to shrink over the next 2 months. You really will not be able to get away with things like that whenever you're in much tighter football games. Those mistakes made this a much closer game than it should have. I think, again, the opening drive for Georgia was much better. Mike Bobo, like I said earlier, called a great game, but you couldn't put UAB away. You should have had your backups in much earlier in this game. That's been the story all season long for Georgia. Again, we don't know what this Georgia team is like because of this, but these are trends that you're going to have to eliminate if you want to continue to play for the goals that you set before the season. I don't think we've learned whether or not this is a roster that is conducive to championship football yet. But again, you're going to learn that in the next couple of games, and you just don't know that yet. But like I said, injuries have made this coaching job a little bit more difficult than the last couple of years. The difficulty's been ramped up a little bit because of the guys that have not been on the field for Georgia so far. So this was a win over a group of 5 opponent that wasn't as easy as it should have been. There was never a point in this game where Georgia was really in jeopardy of losing. But I think, again, you have to put yourself in situations where you're not having to settle down in the second half. You have to take over games in the first half. And that is something that Kirby Smart and his coaching staff are going to have to work on, because they're going into what will be a hostile environment at Auburn. They're coming off a tough loss where they learned a lot about their football team as well against a real opponent. And that's what Georgia is going to do. This is going to be where you find out what kind of team you have against a pretty solid Auburn football team, at least on defense. Pretty good running game. Some spare parts that Hugh Freeze is working with offensively, but defensively, that is a team that should be able to hang for at least 3 quarters against anyone. So, a lot to work with there. I think that overall, this team has not come out and played inspired football yet. They still seem to be sleepwalking and going through the motions. But at the same time, I still think this team, again, at 4-0, you still have everything to play for. You're starting to get Carson Beck some more confidence. Can he play off script? Can he make these decisions from the pocket? Isn't as clean as it was today? Something you still have to figure out. Does he trust his targets down the field? Will you be able to push the ball down the field instead of just hitting your dump off man and asking Brock Bowers to get 75% of his yards after the catch or after the line of scrimmage? Because again, I think the one thing we did learn today is that Brock Bowers is still Brock Bowers. He can still make any offense look good and make plays regardless if he gets the ball with 3 tacklers in front of him with 12 yards to go before first down. I don't think that's an issue for a guy like him. He showed you that regardless if he's 100% or not, he still is an incredibly talented player. So that much we already knew going into today. So not going to say that you learned a lot about Georgia football today, but you got yourselves a night game. You got yourselves a win, and you get to head into SEC play and hopefully get healthy, getting some guys back, having Javon Bullard back. When do you get Lab McConkey back? Michael Williams being back would be huge. You need to get healthy and know that you're going to have to play inspired football to, go out there and play the kind of Georgia football that you've become accustomed to the last couple of seasons, but have yet to really show it this year. We'll talk more about Auburn next week, but for this edition of the Junkyard Dogcast, I'm Kip Adams. You guys have a great weekend.